Hi and welcome. Here are the books I've read recently, and for various reasons, I don't plan on filming reviews for any of these. Not because I hated any of them, and I am looking forward to talking about each one of these, but weirdly, none of these are going to get their own video, and I'm fine with that. This first one, I wasn't sure if I was even going to count it or talk about it because I did already film a review for it, but it is the last book that I read that I wanted to dedicate a whole video to. It's Robin Hobb. It's the first book in a Realm of the Elderling series. I felt like it deserved its own video, even though I was not super happy with it. So I'm not going to spend time in this video talking about this book, since I already did, and already moving on to the next one. This next one is the only fantasy I read this month, or last month. I didn't make a wrap-up video for September, so this counts for both. And that is The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. This is a fantasy Mulan retelling, and I picked it up because over the summer I had been looking at what new books were coming out for the next few months, some anticipated releases that I was a little interested in, and one of them was the second book in this series. And I thought, well, if the second book looks interesting, I need to read the first one first. And I do love the Mulan story. I've read a couple of books in the last year that included versions of a girl who goes to war in place of her father. Not as the main story, but like that legend was included in a couple of the books that I read. And since I like the Mulan story and I like fantasy books, I thought it seemed the perfect mashup of ideas. But then when I read it, it seemed like a slightly more adult version, but not as good as the Disney retelling, which was kind of disappointing. I would say as far as fantasy elements, it really doesn't have much more than the Disney version, which is not even a fantasy retelling. The only little element of magic or fantasy that the Disney version has is Mushu. I hope I'm remembering that right because it's been so long since I've seen it. The little spirit dragon companion and then the ancestors' spirits. This one was pretty equal, maybe a little more, and the dragon creature, rather than being physically with the main character, called Meilin instead of Mulan here, he's more like a spiritual presence that resides within a stone charm that she wears, and when her mental defenses are down, the dragon can speak to her. But the dragon in this version is not kind or humorous, he's much more malevolent and is trying to get Meilin to do what he wants her to do for his own nefarious reasons. Also, the father is not a kind father. He is an abusive father who's giving her in marriage to a man who is going to be an abusive husband, and she decides, no, I don't need that in my life, and that is why she runs away to join the army. It's not the act of self-sacrificial love to go take her father's place. It is the, I want to have some agency in my own life and decide things for myself and not be controlled by everyone around me just because I'm a woman. So there's a pretty hefty feminism flavor, which I think is totally appropriate for the Mulan story. And partway through, I just kind of got tired of reading it. I didn't feel like it added enough newness or difference or more that was special from any other version that I have seen. I will admit that the main version I'm comparing it to is the Disney version, both animated and live action, and I was hoping for more fantastical elements to make it seem more slotted into the fantasy genre, but not having as much of that as I had hoped for isn't what disappointed me. It was more just that it felt like it kind of fell flat. It didn't feel that great. The prose was very, very plain, which is fine. I am not against simple prose, but something I've been noticing in some of the modern storytelling, and I don't know how often this occurs in other genres, but I've been noticing it more in the fantasy genre because that's what I read more, whatever. And especially in first-person view books is a lot of contractions. And a lot of contractions during the just narrative parts. Narrator is speaking, telling the story, not even during dialogue, just would've, could've, should've, I'd've, just as part of the prose, and I find that I don't like that. It feels so casual and so modern, which for certain stories is fine, but for a story that's supposed to feel like ancient China, which it's not. This is a fantasy setting with a fantasy world. it still felt wrong. It didn't feel like it was drawing me into the correct mind frame for the story that was being told. And then being written for a more adult audience, there's a little more adult content. So violence, at least one bedroom scene. I was skimming by that point just to get to the end. I would even say I just DNF'd because I skimmed so much and just kind of skipped to the last chapter. So there might be more in there that I just didn't notice. But for me, I do not plan on reading the second one. I'm not going to say that it was so bad that someone else who enjoys the Mulan story might not like it. As long as you know that it's not amazing prose, it's just like another version of the story without being super special and different. With correct expectations, I think it would be fine. But I was ready to move on and have different books in my life by that point. So once I finished this one, I decided to go ahead and try one that's been on my shelf for several months and that I've had my eye on for a while. That is Bridge of Birds by Barry Hewart. Hewart. The secondary title is A Novel of Ancient China That Never Was. So since I had just put down the Mulan retelling, it seemed like a good time to pick up this other book set in a fictional version of China. I didn't know how heavily it was going to be in the fantasy realm versus more like historical fiction, and I DNF'd this one pretty early on. For one, it was kind of giving me the vibes of this adult male author sees women and young girls in a way that I am not comfortable with, and I'm not sure I want to read a whole book with that type of author gaze. And then the storytelling style was very meandering. Like, let's start here with this character, but as they interact with these other characters, let's go on this wandering path about these other characters that really doesn't matter at all. And then this other character is going to talk to this other character, but first a quick history lesson about that character and the dream that they had that goes on for way too long. And it was so tangential. It was just taking so many tangents that didn't matter, that weren't part of the plot, just like this author could not stay on task with the story he was trying to tell. If all the extra stuff had been cut out and we just followed the character doing what he was trying to do, which is to go on a quest to save the children of his village, it could have maybe been good. Maybe. And then also the author's narration style seemed like it was trying to be more witty than it was succeeding at being. Which, as far as that goes, I think if you have the right audience who enjoys that kind of prose, it's fine. For me, I was just like, I'm not enjoying this. And so I've really been trying to be better at DNFing. It's hard because I feel like I'm being disloyal. I feel like I'm giving up. And there is that little bit of feeling of, I started a story and now I don't know how it finishes. So if it seems like a story that I might have otherwise enjoyed, if it was better, I'll read the very end to see how it ended. I did do that here, but I was glad that I didn't spend the time to read the whole thing. And my next two books, I did not DNF, and I enjoyed both of them, but they are not fantasy books. And I have found that on this channel, where I usually talk about fantasy books, reviewing a book that is far out of that genre just doesn't do well. Which normally, if I like a book well enough to talk about it anyway, I will and won't be concerned about how many people watch it. But for these, I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about them here and then not make full videos for them. So the first one is Gone to the Woods by Gary Paulsen. I really enjoyed this book. I have never read anything by him before. I have been eyeballing his most famous work, Hatchet, for my older son. But as we were browsing at the library and I was thinking, what books should I decide to check out for my children? Because we do a combination of they pick out their own, I pick out a couple that I'd like them to read. I saw this one. This one is the author Gary Paulsen telling the story of young Gary Paulsen. I don't know how much of it is completely accurate versus fictionalized. I think he wanted to include real things that happened in his life. Maybe he told them a little more in a storytelling style, but I think instances from his childhood that really stood out to him and really happened to him and put him on the life path that he got on are included in here. And so how accurate they are versus fictionalized, I don't think matters as much as these are instances that changed the course of his life for him. He wrote this as one of his more recent books, later on in his author career, later on in his life, and it starts when he's about 5 years old. So it has this really interesting perspective of telling what happened to him when he was 5 and a little bit older and 13 and young adulthood. But as he's telling it, he's looking at those experiences from the perspective of his older life. And so like shining the light of, I'm looking back now and understanding more about that time from an adult's point of view while telling about the younger version of himself. And so there were scenes that were very poignant because young Gary was experiencing this thing and feeling this thing, and young Gary didn't understand it. But then adult, older Gary could look back and say, this is what he was feeling. This describes that experience, which I thought was a really interesting, I guess just a really interesting reading experience. And young Gary went through quite a lot. He was a very young boy during World War II. And it says that while he wasn't an orphan, he was a lost child. The secondary title to Gone to the Woods is Surviving a Lost Childhood. He talks about a very brief span of happiness in his childhood. And then he tells about how he goes from that happy place with his aunt and his uncle to be taken away by his mom to go meet up with his dad, who's in the military, to, I think, the Philippines. And he witnesses a lot of things that a young boy should never have to witness. And while there was not really an understanding of trauma or PTSD at that time, looking at what he went through, I think it's pretty obvious that he has experienced that. And he did not have mentally healthy, nurturing parents. So when he witnessed things he should not have, what was he supposed to do with that? With those memories, with those images that he got in his brain? Writing about them, I guess. Holding them deep inside for a long time and then eventually writing about them. And then it goes on to talk about some of his teenagehood, how he was able to find some well-being and safety at the local library. The librarian who handed him his first book and ignited a passion for reading and writing in him. And how he got put on a path to go into the military. I don't remember if he was in the military during the Vietnam War or not. I'm not remembering the timeline there. But he decided that that was not the life path he wanted to be on. He wanted to do something different with himself, with his life, with his future, and decided that writing was the thing he was going to do. So this is middle grade. It's suggested for ages 10 to 14. So for an adult who's used to big, hefty fantasy books, it's a really easy read. I think I read it in just a few days, partly because I was enjoying it and I wanted to read it, which I think helps with reading speed. So the narration style I could tell was suited to a younger, maybe more male audience. That didn't stop me from enjoying it and wanting to look more into him and his books. So basically, as soon as I finished reading this one, I ordered another book by him, which I'll get to when I get to my TBR. But first, the most recent book that I read that's also not fantasy, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I finally read it. This is one that I've been wanting to read for a very long time. I felt like maybe I just needed a pretty physical copy to incentivize me to read it. My husband bought me this beautiful copy. Again, not a DNF. I fully enjoyed this book, but I'm not going to film a full review for it because, again, not fantasy on a fantasy channel. So, you know that experience when you read a book and then you watch the movie and you have all these comparisons going on in your mind of, that's not how I pictured the character, they left that scene out, why did they even change this thing that was perfectly good in the book? You know, all the things. In this instance, I have seen multiple iterations of film versions of Pride and Prejudice, and so got to experience reading the book with all of that in my brain. And honestly, I think the versions I've seen have all done a really good job of capturing the feel of the story, the things in the narrative that Austen felt were important, like the relationships between sisters, parents, the things that were seen as the most important parts of life, the pride and the prejudice between the characters to each other, and the language in the book is basically exactly what you get in the dialogue of movies based on the book. So as a reading experience, I did feel pulled back in time, which was fine. I didn't mind that. It's been a while since I've read anything with an omniscient narrator, which I think was fine in this instance. It's still mostly from Elizabeth Bennet's point of view, but you get more into Mr. Darcy's head. You get to see more, there's just more detail. You know, no movie adaptation or even like series adaptation can capture everything, every detail. So things that I noticed, it's a lot easier to hate Mr. Wickham in the book. You just get more of his like pretense when he wants people to believe him. You hear more about the unfortunate things that he has done with his life, and the betrayal seems bigger. You get to see more into Mr. Darcy's point of view of things. So not so much that you're in his head, but you get to know more how he's feeling about Elizabeth, so it doesn't seem so sudden that, oh my gosh, now he's proposing. You see the lead up to it a little bit more. And in the book, I dislike Mr. Collins more. In film adaptations, he seems to be more represented as just kind of awkward, unconscious of how much he's fawning and trying to get attention, but like a lovable awkward. But in the book, he feels more portrayed as, it's more like purposeful or more with ill intent. Or as he's writing letters to Mr. Bennet later on in the book, when some unfortunate things have happened, it feels like he's feeling more ownership of the family. Like he has the right to tell Mr. Bennet what he's done wrong by raising his daughters. Because he's going to inherit the fortune and the home, he gets to have some kind of say in the family. And I was like, no, judging the Bennets is not your job here. So overall, I found this an enjoyable read and an enjoyable reading experience. And now I feel like going and watching one of the movies. Probably the one with Keira Knightley. That's my favorite one, and I love the music in that one. So this is what I've read. Now I'll go on into my TBR portion, at least for November. The next book that I plan on reading, and I've already read like the introductory parts, is the Gary Paulson book that I bought right after finishing Gone into the Woods, and that is Northwind. So this one was like described, I think on Amazon or something, as Hatchet is to the woods. This one is to the ocean with more of like a Nordic inspiration. So it's middle grade, recommended for ages 10 to 14. So it should be another pretty easy read. This one, interestingly, was published posthumously. I think I said that right. I noticed that the publication date was 2022, but the author died in 2021. So this is like one of the last things he wrote. So like I said, I've never read Hatchet or anything else by Paulson, but I found myself really enjoying his older person perspective on what his younger version went through. And so I was hoping that this one would have some of that same kind of like, I'm at the end of my life and here's what I think about things now. I haven't started the story yet. I don't know how it will be, but I am looking forward to reading a just straight up fictional story by him and seeing what I think about it. Oh, it's on the back of this book. I thought I saw it on Amazon. Set centuries ago along a rugged coastline, Northwind does for the ocean what Hatchet does for the woods, as it relates the story of a young person's battle to stay alive against the odds where the high seas meet a northern wilderness. Also, the art is beautiful. I'm loving these colors and like the mountains and the orcas in there. So looking forward to trying this. And then I don't have a plan for what I'm reading next in November. I've read a few disappointing books lately, including some disappointing fantasy, and I'd really love to just read a good, well-done fantasy book. Whether that's something published recently that has come out recently, or something older that I need to catch up on, I don't even know or care. So a couple of things I'm thinking about. I am not in the mood right now to continue the Rain Wild Chronicles by Robin Hobb. I'd like to give myself a little more time before the next one. I might continue The Wheel of Time. I am on Winter's Heart, so maybe it's the perfect one for this time of year. I don't know. And whether I read it in November or December or just wait until I am really in the mood for it, I don't know. But this is one I'm considering. Another one I'm kind of eyeballing on my shelf is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So I have actually started this one twice. I got this as a gift from my brother so long ago, probably almost 20 years ago. It's only been out like 21 years. So I think this was probably a new release when my brother gifted it to me. And I don't remember why I stopped either of the times, because from what I remember, I enjoyed it both times. The second time I got a little farther, but this one feels like it will be appropriate coming up into winter. It's a big, hefty fantasy. It's, oh man, I don't know if I remember that much. It's by Susanna Clarke. Probably should have mentioned that. 19th century England. From what I remember, there's a couple of different magicians, but one of them is like a theoretical magician. He gets together with his other magician friends and they talk about the theory of magic. But it's a pretty well accepted fact that magic is only theoretical and you can't actually do magic. And then the other main character comes along who can actually perform magic. And that's pretty much all I remember. I think I remember one of them being taken, the one who can do magic, to be part of like the war effort or something. Ah, yes, they joined forces in the war against France. All right, I kind of don't want to keep reading the back of that and give myself spoilers, but this is one that I've never purposefully DNF'd. I hold nothing against it. I think it's been a little daunting to start it again because I have started it twice and not finished. Just knowing that I have to read the first part again because I don't remember anything. I can't just try to start where I left off. And so I was like waiting for long enough to have forgotten it enough that it feels like I'm reading a new book. But I've only ever heard good things about it. My cousin recently read it and had good things to say about it. So this one is a strong maybe. I've been eyeballing Uprooted by Naomi Novik. At this point, having read more romantasy or romantic fantasy this year than I have in the past, I don't feel ready to read another one already. I say already. I've read like 4 at least, which is more than usual. But if you follow my Instagram, I'll post what I'm reading. So if you want to read something at the same time as somebody else out there, I usually post those to my stories, not posts that stay there. This motion was like me scrolling on my phone, if that didn't make sense. Thank you to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much, especially the sticking around while I've been posting a little less frequently lately. I'm hoping to fix that after the Christmas holiday season for 2026. I will post links to some of these books and my Patreon and my Instagram, and happy reading. Bye.